over 1,000 years, one of the most explosive books in biblical history was completely erased, banned from most Bibles, hidden in Ethiopian monasteries, and containing stories so shocking they rewrite everything you thought you knew about angels, giants, and human origins. This is the Book of Enoch. It transforms a single mysterious line from Genesis, "Enoch walked with God, then he was no more," into an epic saga of cosmic rebellion, fallen angels called the Watchers, their giant offspring, the Nephilim, and celestial secrets that explain why evil entered our world. Found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, quoted in the New Testament, yet systematically removed from the Bible. Why? What does it actually say? And what does the church not want you to know about humanity's true past? Tonight, we're going beyond the conspiracy theories to examine the actual text, the history, the structure, and the haunting stories that have captivated and terrified readers for millennia. Enoch appears in Genesis in just one brief, mysterious line. Enoch walked with God, then he was no more because God took him. The Book of Enoch transforms that cryptic mention into an entire saga of prophecy, judgment, and otherworldly visions. Yet, it's absent from the Hebrew Bible and most Christian Bibles, preserved in full only in the ancient Ge'ez language of Ethiopia, and valued there as scripture fragments found among the Dead Sea Scrolls confirm its antiquity and its wide readership before it was removed from most canons. Whether you see it as inspired scripture, apocalyptic literature, or ancient mythology, the Book of Enoch offers a vivid window into how early cultures explained evil, divine justice, and humanity's place in the cosmos. By the end of this journey, you'll know its stories, its history, and the mystery of why it disappeared for over 1,000 years. So, let's begin at the only place we can where Enoch's story first takes shape. Who was Enoch? If you open the book of Genesis and start reading through the early genealogies, you'll notice that most of them follow the same formula. They name a patriarch, tell you how long he lived, mention his children, and then simply state that he died. But in Genesis 5, something different happens. When you reach the 7th generation from Adam, Enoch, the pattern changes. Instead of saying, "and he died," the text says that Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him. No explanation, no details, just that one cryptic line. That single sentence has sparked centuries of speculation. Did God took him mean that Enoch died in some special way? Was he taken to heaven without experiencing death at all? The brevity of the account only makes it more intriguing. Out of all the antediluvian patriarchs, those who lived before the biblical flood, Enoch's story stands out as uniquely mysterious. Later, biblical references add just a little more to the picture. The New Testament's letter to the Hebrews says that Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death, and that he was commended as one who pleased God. The short letter of Jude even quotes from the Book of Enoch itself, presenting him as a prophet who foretold divine judgment. These scattered mentions, while brief, cemented his image as a figure with an unusual relationship to the divine. But if you look beyond the Bible's limited references, a much larger and stranger portrait emerges. In extra-biblical Jewish traditions, Enoch becomes far more than just a righteous man. He's described as the scribe of heaven, recording the deeds of humanity for God's judgment. In some writings, he acts as an intermediary between God and the angels, even interceding for rebellious spirits. In others, he's portrayed as a visionary prophet, shown the workings of the cosmos, seeing the storehouses of the winds, the courses of the stars, and the fate of the wicked and the righteous. This expansion of Enoch's role didn't come out of nowhere. Ancient cultures in the Near East often told stories of antediluvian sages, figures who lived before a great flood and were entrusted with divine knowledge. In Mesopotamian myths, there's a similar pattern. Wise men or kings who receive instruction from the gods, sometimes taken to heaven or transformed in some way. One example is the figure of Enmeduranki, a pre-flood king of Sippar, said to have been given secrets of divination by the sun god Shamash before being taken into the assembly of the gods. The parallels to Enoch are hard to miss. Both are righteous figures. Both are granted heavenly knowledge, and both disappear from the earthly realm in a mysterious way. Enoch's 7th place position in the Genesis genealogy may have also been symbolic. In the ancient world, the number 7 often signified completion or perfection. Being the 7th from Adam could have been a way of marking Enoch as a figure of special importance, someone set apart from the others, destined for a role beyond the ordinary. But perhaps the biggest question is this: why would such a short biblical mention inspire such a massive body of literature? The collection we call the Book of Enoch, or more accurately, the Books of Enoch, isn't a single work written all at once. It's a compilation of several texts composed over centuries that expand Enoch's story into hundreds of verses. These writings explore his journeys to heaven, his encounters with angels, and his detailed visions of the future. They introduce whole new characters like the Watchers, a group of angels who descend to Earth and disrupt the divine order. And they delve into themes of cosmic rebellion, judgment, and restoration. For the ancient communities that preserved and copied these writings, Enoch wasn't just a minor patriarch. He was a bridge between heaven and earth, between divine knowledge and human ignorance. And in a world where written records were rare and often tied to sacred authority, the idea of Enoch as the scribe of heaven carried immense weight. The fascination with Enoch may also have been fueled by the sense that his story contained hidden knowledge, truths not available to everyone. In an era when religious texts were often guarded by priestly classes, a book that claimed to reveal heavenly secrets could have been seen as both thrilling and dangerous. That might help explain why, despite its influence, the Book of Enoch eventually fell out of favor in most Jewish and Christian traditions. Even so, the mystery of Enoch's life, or rather his departure, remains at the heart of the intrigue. Here's a man who lived in an age when lifespans were counted in centuries, who walked with God in a way no one else is said to have done, and who left the earth without the normal finality of death. Was he simply an ancient moral exemplar elevated by later tradition? Or was there something more to the story, something that ancient scribes tried to preserve in the sprawling, complex, and sometimes unsettling visions that bear his name? And that's where our journey into the Book of Enoch begins. Because to understand what it says about giants, angels, and the mysteries of heaven, we first have to understand the man at its center and why generations of believers, storytellers, and scholars have been unwilling to let his story fade into a single line of scripture. Origins and history of the book. When we talk about the origins of the Book of Enoch, we're not talking about a single moment when one person sat down and wrote it start to finish. This is a text with layers built up over time by different authors in different contexts and eventually brought together into the form we now know. Scholars generally date its composition between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century CE, a period of huge religious and political change in the ancient Jewish world. This was the era of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, when apocalyptic literature, the kind of writing that reveals heavenly secrets, predicts cosmic judgment, and pulls back the curtain on the end of days, was thriving. The Book of Enoch fits perfectly into that environment, and yet it also stands apart. It's now widely accepted that the book is composite made up of several separate works: the Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. Each section has its own style, themes, and emphases, suggesting they were written by different authors or communities before being compiled. That helps explain the book's sheer range. It moves from angelic rebellions to complex star maps to moral exhortations, all under the umbrella of Enoch's name. The original language of most, if not all, of these sections was Aramaic, the common tongue of much of the ancient Near East at the time. Over the centuries, copies would be translated into Greek and eventually into Ge'ez, the ancient Ethiopic language. And here's where things take an unusual turn. While most of the ancient Jewish world moved away from the text, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved it in its entirety. Today, the only complete copies of the Book of Enoch survive in Ge'ez. Its rediscovery in the West is almost a story in itself. European scholars first became aware of it in the 18th century when Scottish traveler James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with several Ge'ez manuscripts. For centuries, the book had been considered lost, known only through scattered references in other writings. Suddenly, there it was, complete, and offering an entirely new dimension to biblical history. That discovery was later confirmed and deepened in the mid-20th century when fragments of the Book of Enoch turned up among the Dead Sea Scrolls in the caves of Qumran. Written in Aramaic and dating to at least the 2nd century BC, these fragments showed that Enoch wasn't just an obscure Ethiopian oddity. It had been read, copied, and valued in ancient Judea itself long before it vanished from most traditions. The cultural setting of its composition is crucial to understanding its content. Second Temple Judaism was a diverse and often fractious world. You had various sects, the Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and others, debating law, purity, and the right interpretation of Scripture. Apocalyptic visions like those in Enoch spoke to people living under foreign rule, grappling with questions about divine justice, human corruption, and the ultimate fate of the world. But that leads to one of the enduring mysteries. If the Book of Enoch was so widely read and clearly influential, even being quoted in the New Testament Book of Jude, why was it excluded from the final Hebrew Bible and later from most Christian canons? The answer isn't straightforward. Some suggest its content was too speculative with angelology and cosmology that went far beyond what became mainstream. Others point to its strong condemnations of corrupt leaders, which might have made it politically awkward. Whatever the reason, by the early centuries of the Common Era, the Book of Enoch had largely disappeared from Jewish and Christian circulation outside of Ethiopia. For over 1,000 years, it was essentially hidden from view, its stories of the Watchers and the Nephilim fading into obscurity until travelers, scholars, and a cache of ancient scrolls brought it back into the conversation. It's here that the story of the Book of Enoch turns from its long winding history into the substance of the text itself. To understand why the book captured so much attention in the ancient world, we have to look at its structure because each section opens a different window into how people once imagined angels, the cosmos, and divine judgment. Structure of the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch, as we have it today, isn't one seamless single narrative. It's a compilation, a collection of 5 distinct works that were composed at different times, likely by different authors, and eventually gathered together under Enoch's name. Each section has its own style, focus, and purpose, which is one of the reasons scholars believe the text grew over centuries rather than being written all at once. Understanding these parts is key to understanding why the book resonated so strongly in the ancient world and why it continues to intrigue today. The first section, known as the Book of the Watchers, is the most famous. This is where the story of the Watchers' angels who descended to Earth takes center stage. It describes how they took human wives, producing the Nephilim, the giants, and taught humanity forbidden knowledge. This section is rich in dramatic imagery, painting a picture of divine beings breaking heavenly laws and the resulting chaos on Earth. It also describes Enoch's role as an intermediary delivering messages between God, the Watchers, and humanity. For many readers, this is the heart of the Book of Enoch, where its themes of rebellion, judgment, and cosmic order are most vivid. The second section, the Book of Parables or Similitudes, shifts tone and content. Instead of focusing on the Watchers, it presents a series of allegorical visions about the coming judgment, the fate of sinners, and the reward of the righteous. This is also where we encounter the mysterious Son of Man figure, a messianic character who will sit in judgment over kings and mighty ones. The style here is more symbolic, less historical in feel, and filled with courtroom-like scenes of divine justice. Next is the astronomical book, sometimes called the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries. This section is entirely different in focus. It's a detailed description of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars as revealed to Enoch by angelic guides. It outlines complex calendars, astronomical cycles, and the laws governing the heavenly bodies. Some scholars see this as a reflection of the priestly interest in timekeeping and festivals, while others point to its surprisingly precise astronomical observations as evidence of advanced ancient knowledge. The fourth section, the Dream Visions, returns to narrative visions, this time in the form of symbolic animal apocalypse imagery. Human history is retold using animals to represent people and nations: sheep, bulls, and other creatures stand in for tribes, leaders, and empires. Through these dream sequences, Enoch witnesses the story of humanity from creation to the final judgment, with particular emphasis on the flood and the fate of the Watcher's offspring. Finally, there is the Epistle of Enoch. This is a collection of exhortations, blessings, and warnings addressed to Enoch's descendants and future generations. It's more direct and moralizing than the other sections, urging listeners to follow righteousness and avoid the corruption that brought destruction to the ancient world. The style is closer to wisdom literature, but it still carries apocalyptic overtones, looking ahead to a final reckoning. Taken together, these 5 sections make the Book of Enoch unlike anything else from the period. The shift in tone from one part to another, narrative to allegory, astronomy to moral instruction, makes it feel like a small library of related works rather than a single book. This variety also reflects the composite authorship theory that the book grew organically, with different communities adding their own visions, teachings, and symbolic systems under the shared authority of Enoch's name. What makes this structure so fascinating is how each part offers a different lens into ancient beliefs about the boundaries between divine and human, the structure of the cosmos, the moral order of the world, and the ultimate destiny of humanity. It's as if the compilers wanted to cover every possible angle: cosmic rebellion, messianic hope, scientific observation, symbolic history, and practical moral guidance. If the Book of Enoch had contained only one of these sections, it might have been seen as just another piece of apocalyptic writing or wisdom teaching. But together, they create something far more ambitious. A sweeping vision that claims to explain both the hidden past and the destined future, the visible world, and the unseen realms. So, let's move beyond the outline and begin opening each of these works one by one, starting with the one that's captured the most attention for centuries, the Book of the Watchers. The Watchers descend to Earth. In the Book of Enoch, one of the most arresting episodes is the descent of the Watchers, heavenly beings whose choice to leave their appointed place sets in motion the events that dominate the book's opening chapters. It begins with a group of 200 angels led by a figure named Semyaza. These are not nameless, faceless entities. The text gives us a roll call of leaders, each with a distinct role in what follows. They descend to Mount Hermon, a location whose name becomes forever linked with their oath, a mutual agreement that they will take human women as wives, no matter the consequences. The Watchers' actions echo a short and somewhat cryptic passage in Genesis 6:1-4, which speaks of the sons of God taking daughters of men and producing a race of giants. But where Genesis moves quickly past the episode, Enoch lingers, expanding it into a dramatic rebellion. The angels, now bound by their oath, take human women and beget children of unusual size and power, the Nephilim, whose presence on earth will lead to chaos and violence. Alongside this interbreeding comes another equally serious transgression: forbidden knowledge. The Watchers teach humanity arts and sciences that had been withheld from them. Azazel, one of the named leaders, instructs people in making weapons, swords, knives, shields, introducing organized warfare on a new scale. Others teach enchantments, root cutting, the use of cosmetics and jewelry, astrology, and the signs of the stars. While these might sound benign or even beneficial to us today, in the worldview of the text, they are corruptions, gifts given out of time, bringing moral decay and accelerating humanity's downfall. The idea of angels or divine beings of any kind openly defying their creator and altering the course of human development would have been shocking in the ancient world. It reverses the expected order. Instead of angels guarding humanity, they exploit and endanger it. For Enoch's audience, steeped in a belief that cosmic order was essential to life, this breach was more than scandalous. It was catastrophic. What makes this story especially intriguing is the way it blends the mythic with the strangely specific. We're not just told that knowledge was imparted, the text enumerates it, giving us lists of skills and sciences, some practical, others arcane. Why such detail? Was the writer drawing from older traditions in which culture bringers, often semi-divine figures, descended to teach humanity? Mesopotamian myths, for instance, tell of the Apkallu, sages sent by the god Enki to impart civilization's arts before the Great Flood. Could the Watchers be a transformed echo of these figures, recast here not as benefactors, but as villains? It's also worth noting that the Watchers' leader, Semyaza, doesn't coerce the others. Instead, he fears that if only he acts, he will bear the guilt alone. The oath is a way of binding the group together, ensuring that all share the risk. This element of collective complicity gives the episode a very human dimension: peer pressure, mutual assurance, and a shared plunge into wrongdoing. From here, the narrative tightens. The giants born of these unions begin to consume the resources of the earth. When food runs short, they turn to devouring animals and eventually humans. Violence spreads, and the cries of the earth reach heaven. This descent of the Watchers is no mere romantic transgression. It is the root cause of a worldwide crisis that will eventually demand a flood to cleanse the earth. Scholars debate what lies behind this story. Is it a dramatized memory of a cultural shift, perhaps, when advanced technologies or practices arrived suddenly in the ancient Near East? Could it reflect memories of a now lost people, taller or stronger than the surrounding population who were seen as the offspring of gods? Or is it a moral parable warning that knowledge without restraint leads to ruin? The text doesn't tell us outright. It leaves the cause open to interpretation, even as it describes the effects in detail. The Watcher's descent also raises questions about free will in the celestial realm. If angels can choose to disobey, what does that say about their nature? In the Book of Enoch, the answer seems clear. They can act against their mandate, but doing so has irreversible consequences, not only for themselves, but for all of creation. The punishment that will follow, described later in the book, is as severe as their crime is audacious. By naming the angels and specifying their teachings, the author gives the rebellion texture and plausibility. We can imagine the weapons in human hands for the first time, the sky being charted in ways it hadn't before, the allure of adornment, the danger of enchantments. Each of these gifts alters human society in some way, making it richer but also more perilous. The underlying message is complex. It's not that knowledge itself is evil, but that its timing and purpose matter. Mount Hermon, the setting for the Watcher's oath, also adds weight to the story. This mountain on the modern border of Lebanon and Syria was known in antiquity as a sacred and sometimes ominous place. In making their pact there, the Watchers tie their fate to a landmark that already carried spiritual significance, anchoring the myth in a real-world geography familiar to the audience. The descent of the Watchers is in many ways the hinge of the Book of Enoch's first section. It explains the origin of the Nephilim, the moral corruption of humanity, and the need for divine intervention. It also establishes Enoch's role. He will be the intermediary, the one to relay the coming judgment to these celestial rebels. Without this episode, much of what follows, the visions, the prophecies, the elaborate descriptions of heavenly places, would lack their central cause. What makes this passage endure is its blend of the cosmic and the human. The Watchers are otherworldly beings, yet their motives, desire, curiosity, ambition, fear of isolation are deeply relatable. That combination invites the listener to wonder whether this is a story about beings from another realm, a mythologized history of human change, or a cautionary tale wrapped in supernatural drama. And as we turn from the descent itself to the giants it produced and the chaos they unleashed, the mystery only deepens. Were these giants meant to be taken literally, or were they symbolic of something else? Empires, warrior elites, overwhelming forces that dominated early human life. Whatever the answer, the Watcher's choice to step down from heaven sets the stage for one of the most dramatic confrontations in ancient religious literature, a conflict that will reshape the earth and its inhabitants. Next, we'll follow the story into its inevitable consequence. Giants of the ancient world, the Nephilim. The rise and rampage of the Nephilim and the world's slide toward a judgment that can't be avoided. When the Watchers descended and took human wives, their unions produced something entirely outside the natural order, the Nephilim. In the Book of Enoch, they are described as giants, immense in both stature and appetite, beings whose very existence tilted the balance of life on earth. Their birth is framed as a direct result of angelic rebellion, a kind of living evidence of the Watcher's transgression. The text paints them as larger than life in every sense. They are massive, powerful, and initially awe-inspiring, but they quickly become a menace. At first, their size and strength seem to place them above ordinary humanity, but with their unnatural appetites, they devour the Earth's resources at an alarming rate. Grain, livestock, game, nothing is enough. When their hunger can no longer be satisfied, the account turns dark. They begin to consume humans. Violence becomes their defining trait, not just for survival, but as an expression of dominance. Enoch doesn't present them as solitary monsters roaming a wasteland. These are organized warlike entities. The book describes them turning on one another in destructive conflicts, their immense battle spilling over into the human world. Cities and settlements are caught in the chaos, and bloodshed saturates the land. It's not just their physicality that's overwhelming, it's the scale of destruction they bring. This picture of overwhelming force and insatiable hunger isn't unique to Enoch. Many cultures have myths of giants whose presence disrupts the human order. In Greek mythology, the Gigantes rise up against the Olympian gods in a cataclysmic war. Norse legends speak of the Jotnar, primeval beings often in conflict with the gods, and fated to play a role in Ragnarok. Among some Native American traditions, giant cannibals appear in origin stories, remembered as powerful threats defeated by heroic ancestors. These parallels don't prove the Nephilim were real, but they do raise the question, why does the image of destructive, outsized beings recur so widely? In Enoch's account, the giants' violence becomes so great that the earth itself cries out for relief. This imagery, nature itself groaning under the weight of corruption, serves as the turning point. The cries reach heaven, prompting divine judgment. What follows is a celestial crackdown. The Watchers are bound, the giants are destroyed, and the stage is set for the great flood that will wash away the taint of this era. The giants in this telling are not just physical threats. They are symbols of a world out of balance, proof that boundaries between the divine and human realms have been dangerously crossed. One of the eerier aspects of the Nephilim story is how it frames their end. They are not simply killed, they are cut off, erased. Later traditions suggest that their spirits, once disembodied, become malevolent forces wandering the earth, unable to find rest. This is one of the places where Enoch's narrative veers into territory that blurs the line between myth and demonology. It's worth noting how differently the giants are handled in other sources. The brief mention in Genesis 6 is almost an aside, a prelude to the flood narrative. In Numbers 13, the Israelite spies describe seeing the sons of Anak, a race of great size, linking them perhaps rhetorically to the Nephilim, but nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible are they given the kind of sustained attention found in Enoch. This leaves a gap, one that later interpreters, both ancient and modern, have filled with speculation. Were these beings a literal race now lost to history? Could they have been exaggerations of real but rare encounters with exceptionally tall or powerful groups? Or were they purely symbolic, embodying human fears about unchecked power and corruption? There's also the archaeological curiosity factor. From enormous megalithic structures to oversized weapons unearthed in various sites, some point to physical anomalies in the ancient record as potential evidence of giant beings. Mainstream scholarship generally rejects a direct link, but the allure of connecting myth to material remains keeps the idea alive. The Nephilim story gains much of its staying power from its ambiguity. The Book of Enoch gives us detail, names, actions, consequences, but it doesn't resolve the question of what exactly they were. In this way, it invites comparison with other giant traditions, creating a kind of global tapestry of myths that all seem to remember a time when beings larger, stronger, and more dangerous than ordinary humans walked the earth. And here's where the mystery deepens. If these are purely symbolic figures, why are they tied to such specific historical events in the narrative? If they are mythologized memories, what real encounters inspired them? The Book of Enoch leaves these threads hanging, encouraging its readers, and now us, to wonder how much of its tale is allegory and how much is a distorted echo of something that once stood face to face with humanity. Next, we'll see how their reign of chaos provokes not just local retribution, but a sweeping act of cosmic judgment, divine judgment on the fallen angels, the great flood that will erase an age and reset the world. The giant's rampage doesn't fade quietly into the background. It triggers the part of the Book of Enoch where divine justice steps in with full force. This isn't a distant decree handed down in vague terms. It's personal, direct, and carried out through a very specific messenger, Enoch himself. In the story, God appoints Enoch to act as the go-between, delivering his verdict to the Watchers. It's a strange twist, considering Enoch is still human. Here are angels, mighty beings who once moved freely between heaven and earth, now forced to receive their fate through the voice of a mortal. That dynamic alone says something about the reversal of power in the narrative. When Enoch arrives to deliver the message, the tone shifts from awe to judgment. The Watchers who descended to earth in defiance are told their time is over. There's no chance of reprieve. The sentence is harsh. They will be bound, cast into darkness, and held there until the final judgment. In Enoch's vision, this isn't a temporary exile. It's a permanent removal from the order of creation they once shared. The text describes them confined in a place of utter blackness, a stark contrast to the luminous heavens they abandoned. This punishment is more than just retribution. It's framed as a cosmic reset. The Watchers' fall wasn't simply a private rebellion. It disrupted the balance of heaven and earth, corrupted humanity, and brought violence into the world on an unprecedented scale. By removing them, the narrative suggests that balance can begin to return. The imagery Enoch uses when describing their fate is intense. They're chained under mountains, swallowed by the earth, or locked in a deep abyss. These descriptions echo other ancient traditions. In Greek myth, the defeated Titans are bound in Tartarus. In Mesopotamian lore, rebellious gods or monsters are imprisoned beneath the underworld. This raises the question, was the Watchers' punishment part of a wider, older storytelling pattern about cosmic rebellion and the need for order to be restored? There's also a layer of symbolism here that would have resonated with the audience of Second Temple Judaism. The Watcher's crime, crossing divine boundaries, becomes a cautionary tale. It reinforces the idea that there is a moral and cosmic law that even the most powerful beings can't break without consequences. For people living under empires surrounded by foreign religions, the story could be read as a warning against adopting practices or knowledge seen as corrupting. What's intriguing is that Enoch is not just a herald. He also becomes a witness. He sees where the Watchers are confined and records their sentence. His visions place him in a role halfway between prophet and court reporter. That level of detail gives the story weight, making it feel less like abstract theology and more like a documented event. The Watchers themselves plead for mercy, asking Enoch to intercede with God. In a reversal of expectations, their request is denied outright. There's no appeal process, no hope for mitigation. It's one of the few times in biblical or apocryphal literature where angels are depicted not as unshakable messengers of God's will, but as desperate condemned prisoners. The idea of binding until the day of judgment also connects the narrative to eschatology, the study of end times. The Watchers' fate isn't just about the past. It stretches forward into a future reckoning where their final destruction will coincide with the renewal of creation. This gives their story a long shadow, linking it to other apocalyptic visions in Jewish and Christian traditions. And then there's the lingering mystery. Was this episode meant purely as a theological warning to certain groups, perhaps those experimenting with astrology, sorcery, or foreign rituals? Or was it built on fragments of far older myths about heavenly beings who came to Earth, defied their place, and paid the price? The parallels to other cultures are too numerous to ignore, yet the Enoch account shapes them into something distinct. From here, the focus will shift from the fate of the Watchers to the sweeping, world-altering event their corruption helped trigger, a flood meant to cleanse the earth itself. Tucked into the middle of the Book of Enoch is a section that feels very different from the dramatic stories of fallen angels, giants, and divine judgment. It's calmer, more methodical, yet in its own way just as intriguing. This is the astronomical book, sometimes called the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries. Instead of battles and cosmic rebellion, it offers a detailed guide to how the sun, moon, and stars move through the heavens, complete with an exact accounting of days, months, and years. According to the text, the angel Uriel reveals this knowledge directly to Enoch. What follows reads almost like an ancient observatory log. Measurements of the sun's passage through different gates at the horizon, explanations of how daylight lengthens and shortens through the year, and descriptions of the moon's waxing and waning phases. The year is given as 364 days, 12 months of 30 days each, plus 4 extra days, one after each quarter. That might sound odd to us, but it forms a neat symmetrical calendar that always begins each season on the same day of the week. For ancient readers, this wasn't just trivia. A 364-day year meant festivals, harvests, and religious observances could be planned with mathematical precision without the drift that can happen in lunar-based calendars. Yet, here's the curious part. Anyone actually tracking the seasons over decades would notice the problem. The solar year is about 365 and 1 to 4 days long. Without occasional adjustments, what we call intercalation, such a calendar would slowly fall out of sync with the real seasons. The astronomical book acknowledges this in a way. It hints that those who use different systems, like a lunar calendar, are in error and not following the true divine order. This has led many scholars to think the text was written during a period of religious dispute, possibly by a priestly group that saw its own calendar as the only correct one. The Essenes, who preserved fragments of Enoch among the Dead Sea Scrolls, also favored a 364-day year. For them, following the wrong calendar wasn't just inconvenient, it meant celebrating holy days on the wrong dates, an offense with cosmic implications. And that raises an intriguing question. How did the authors gather such precise astronomical information without the benefit of modern instruments? The text describes the changing arc of the sun across the sky through the seasons, the positions of sunrise and sunset, and even variations in the moon's path. All of this could be observed with patience, fixed markers, and generations of careful record-keeping, but the precision and confidence with which it's presented gives the impression of a fully developed scientific system, not just casual stargazing. Some researchers suggest the data may have drawn on even older Mesopotamian or Egyptian traditions, where astronomy was tied closely to religious life. Others think this level of detail implies dedicated watchtowers or horizon markers, allowing observers to track alignments over years. In fact, a few ancient sites in the Near East and Mediterranean do seem to have been constructed with astronomical observation in mind. Stone alignments marking solstices, for example. If such places were in use by Enoch's time, it would make sense for his heavenly knowledge to have very earthly roots. But in the narrative, this isn't human trial and error. Uriel, the angel of the stars, explains it all to Enoch as part of a divinely revealed cosmic order. This framing does more than give authority to the system. It ties correct timekeeping to obedience to God. The heavens are portrayed as a vast, perfectly regulated clock, and to follow its schedule is to live in harmony with creation itself. Stray from it, and you align yourself with chaos. The astronomical book doesn't stop at the sun and moon. It also describes the stars and portals through which they rise and set. Though the descriptions can be dense and repetitive, some passages hint at an understanding of constellations or seasonal star patterns, but always framed in the language of divine law rather than abstract science. What we see in the night sky isn't random. It's a blueprint, a testimony to order. It's tempting to read this section as purely practical, a farmer's almanac in religious dress, but in the context of the Book of Enoch, it's also part of the broader struggle between divine order and the corruption brought by the Watchers. If the fallen angels brought forbidden knowledge that led humanity astray, here the faithful angel brings knowledge meant to guide humanity back onto the right path. And then there's the unresolved mystery. If this calendar was so important to some Jewish groups in the Second Temple period, why did it disappear from most later traditions? The lunar solar calendar tied to the temple in Jerusalem eventually became dominant, and with the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, the debate faded into history. But in the astronomical book, you can still hear the voice of that older argument, insisting there's only one true way to mark the passage of time, whether you see it as theology disguised as astronomy or astronomy wrapped in theology. The astronomical book is a fascinating glimpse into how ancient people connected the sky above with life below, and it leaves us with that lingering question: just how much of this divine system was the product of inspired vision, and how much was the result of generations of meticulous observation carved into the memory of a people watching the heavens? From here, the text will leave the precision of calendars behind and move into visions far more surreal and symbolic, dreams and prophecies that take Enoch into the very heart of cosmic history. The parables and the mysterious Son of Man. Tucked deep into the Book of Enoch is a section that feels both familiar and alien at the same time. Known as the Parables or Similitudes of Enoch, this portion is made up of 3 extended visions, each with its own message, tone, and set of vivid images. Unlike the cosmic measurements of the astronomical book or the mythic rebellion of the Watchers, these parables focus squarely on judgment. Judgment against the wicked, vindication for the righteous, and the rise of a figure who stands at the center of it all, the mysterious Son of Man. The first parable paints a picture of the final judgment of corrupt rulers and oppressors. It's not subtle. Kings and mighty ones who have exploited the earth's people are called to account before the throne of the great glory, a divine court where no bribe or power can shield them. The text doesn't shy away from describing the reversal of fortunes. Those who seemed untouchable on earth are brought low, while the faithful, often downtrodden in life, are lifted up and given honor. In a world where injustice was often the norm, this was an audacious vision. The second parable shifts the focus to the one who will preside over this judgment, the Son of Man. This figure appears as a pre-existent chosen one, someone who has been hidden with God from the beginning and revealed only at the appointed time. His role is sweeping. He is to be a light to the nations, a judge of kings, a refuge for the righteous, and an instrument of cosmic renewal. For readers steeped in Jewish apocalyptic literature, this is charged language, blending prophetic tradition with bold new imagery. What's especially fascinating is how much of this language echoes in the New Testament. Phrases about the Son of Man coming in glory, sitting on a throne, separating the righteous from the wicked. These show up in the Gospels attributed to Jesus himself. This raises a compelling historical question. Was the Book of Enoch an influence on early Christian thought? And if so, how deep did that influence run? The parallels are strong enough that scholars have long debated whether the authors of the New Testament were consciously drawing from Enoch's visions, or whether both traditions were tapping into a shared pool of messianic expectation circulating in the Second Temple period. The third parable circles back to themes from the first 2, but with an expanded cosmic backdrop. Here, the Son of Man's reign is linked not just to human justice, but to the renewal of the heavens and the earth. The imagery grows sweeping and poetic, the mountains and seas responding to divine authority, the hidden storehouses of creation being revealed. It's a vision not just of judgment, but of restoration in which the wounds of the world are healed and the righteous find peace. Stylistically, these parables feel different from other parts of Enoch. The narrative voice is more focused on moral exhortation and divine vindication than on detailed cosmic mechanics. This has led many to believe they may have been composed later than some other sections, possibly closer to the time when messianic ideas were evolving rapidly in Jewish thought. If that's true, it would help explain why the Son of Man here is more than just a human leader. He's a transcendent figure with authority over both earthly and heavenly realms. Yet for all their clarity about his role, the parables never give us a concrete identity. Is the Son of Man a symbolic representation of Israel, a purely heavenly being, a future human anointed by God? The text leaves the question open, which may have been part of its enduring appeal. Different communities could project their own expectations and hopes onto the figure, seeing in him the champion they longed for. And then there's the lingering puzzle of why, if these parables carried ideas so resonant with later Christian teaching, the Book of Enoch was excluded from most biblical canons. Was it too speculative, too open to interpretation, Or did its very popularity among certain sects make it controversial to the leaders who eventually shaped the canon? The answers remain elusive, leaving the parables of Enoch as a tantalizing crossroads, one where Jewish apocalyptic hope and early Christian messianism seem to brush past each other without leaving a clear record of the encounter. From here, Enoch's visions will pivot again, trading the courtroom imagery of the parables for scenes of the earth and skies measured out with uncanny precision. The focus will move from the moral order of the world to the physical order of creation itself, a shift that's as striking on the page as it must have been to its earliest hearers. Dream visions, allegories of history and flood. We now move to a section that feels almost like a dream within a dream, fittingly known as the dream visions. Here, Enoch recounts two sweeping visions, both packed with imagery so strange and layered that they've sparked centuries of debate over what they're really saying. Rather than straightforward narrative, these visions operate like dense allegories where every figure, every animal, and every movement on the page carries some deeper meaning. The first vision is an epic retelling of history, but not in the way you'd expect. Instead of naming kings, cities, or nations, Enoch describes entire peoples as animals, sheep, bulls, birds, wild beasts. Each plays a role in this unfolding drama. It begins with Adam and Eve represented as white bulls and moves forward through generations, showing the rise of Israel, its encounters with foreign powers, and its spiritual struggles. The choice to use animal symbolism might have been more than a stylistic quirk. It could have served as a kind of coded language. In an era when political commentary could be dangerous, presenting your critique as an animal fable allowed it to slip past censors while still delivering the message to those in the know. As the story unfolds, the animals multiply and intermingle. Sheep often represent the faithful, while darker predatory beasts symbolize foreign oppressors. The imagery grows increasingly tense as flocks are attacked, scattered, or led astray by false shepherds. At times, angelic beings, often described as men, intervene, guiding or punishing the animals. This weaving of earthly history with heavenly oversight gives the vision a cosmic scope. It isn't just about political events. It's about divine justice working itself out across centuries. The second vision takes a sharper turn, moving away from coded history into something far more apocalyptic. Here, Enoch sees an allegorical retelling of the Genesis flood, but again in symbolic form. Waters rise, animals are swept away, and the destruction is total. It's hard not to feel the weight of this imagery, especially when you realize the flood isn't just a natural disaster in this telling, it's also a moral reckoning. The implication is that corruption, violence, and betrayal of the divine order inevitably bring about their own collapse. What makes the dream vision so intriguing is the way they blend history, prophecy, and moral instruction without ever breaking the dreamlike flow. You can't always tell where past events end and future predictions begin. Some scholars think that's the point. These visions were meant to comfort those suffering under oppression by assuring them that history is moving toward justice, even if it's hard to see in the moment. Others see them as political manifestos in disguise with the animal identities corresponding to specific nations or leaders of the time. Of course, this leaves us with the central puzzle. Were these visions purely allegorical, a kind of spiritual parable meant to inspire faith, or were they deliberately coded commentaries on the political realities of Enoch's audience? The animal allegory style has parallels in other ancient literature, from the dreams of the biblical Daniel to the fables of Aesop. In each case, the device serves to both obscure and illuminate, making the meaning clear to insiders while leaving outsiders guessing. The flood vision adds another layer to the mystery. Why retell the flood story in such a veiled form when the Genesis account was already widely known? Was it meant to link the audience's own struggles to that primal act of judgment, suggesting that their current enemies were like the corrupt generation before Noah? Or was it hinting at a future cataclysm, a symbolic warning that history was about to repeat itself? Part of the enduring fascination with the dream visions is that they refuse to pin down their meaning. They offer patterns, echoes, and hints, but no definitive key to decode them. And maybe that's why they've survived, because each generation can read their own story into the symbols, finding relevance in the shifting shapes of sheep, bulls, and floods. As Enoch's dreamlike journey continues, the visions will grow more personal and and more urgent. The imagery will shift from flocks and floods to letters, exhortations, and direct warnings. The Epistle of Enoch, Warnings and Promises, drawing us toward the Epistle of Enoch, where the voice of the prophet comes into sharper focus. The Epistle of Enoch forms the closing portion of the Book of Enoch, and while it's shorter and less elaborate in its storytelling than some of the earlier sections, it carries a weight of urgency. Here, the grand cosmic visions and angelic rebellions give way to something more grounded, direct moral teaching. It reads less like a mysterious dream sequence and more like a sermon or an open letter, a set of instructions aimed at guiding a community through difficult times. The tone is unmistakably exhortative. Over and over, the text draws a clear line between the righteous and the wicked, between those who follow divine law and those who defy it. There are warnings against greed, oppression, and the misuse of power, as well as encouragements to uphold justice, compassion, and humility. It's not framed as abstract philosophy. The language suggests it's addressing real people facing real pressures, perhaps from surrounding cultures or hostile authorities. That has led some scholars to wonder if this portion of Enoch was written specifically for a persecuted or marginalized group, functioning both as moral instruction and as reassurance that their suffering was not unnoticed by heaven. The epistle repeatedly reminds its audience that wrongdoing will not go unpunished. But here, justice is not framed in purely earthly terms. Instead, the text paints sweeping pictures of a final judgment that will upend the current order. There's imagery of cosmic upheaval, mountains trembling, stars shifting from their courses, the very foundations of the earth shaking in response to divine intervention. These aren't just poetic flourishes. In the apocalyptic mindset of the time, such cosmic events were both symbolic and literal signals that the end of the current age was near. One of the more striking features is the epistle's insistence on resurrection and transformation. The righteous dead are not simply remembered. They are promised restoration, rising again to a new form of life. In some passages, this is tied to the renewal of the earth itself, a transformed world where corruption and violence are no longer possible. In others, it's presented as the faithful being elevated into a new, incorruptible state. These promises are contrasted sharply with the fate of the wicked who face destruction, exclusion from the renewed creation, or eternal separation from divine presence. Unlike earlier parts of the Book of Enoch that are dense with coded visions and elaborate symbolism, the epistle style is relatively straightforward. It's as though after chapters of awe-inspiring visions, the writer wants to make sure nothing is left to ambiguity. Here is what's expected of you, here is what will happen, and here is why you must stay faithful. And yet, even in this clarity, there's room for mystery. The descriptions of the coming transformation are vivid but not fully explained, leaving the reader with both comfort and curiosity about what exactly is to come. The combination of moral instruction and eschatological promise makes the epistle a natural conclusion to the Book of Enoch. It gathers up the themes of judgment, cosmic order, and the fate of humanity that have run through the previous sections, and it applies them directly to the lives of the audience. If the earlier visions serve to reveal the hidden workings of the universe, this final section turns those revelations into a call to action, or perhaps more accurately, a call to endurance, and that perhaps is its lasting intrigue. Was this closing exhortation aimed at a specific historical moment, a particular group in the late Second Temple period facing persecution and needing encouragement to stand firm? Or was it meant to be timeless, a moral and theological anchor for any community feeling adrift in a corrupt and hostile world? The text doesn't say, and maybe that's the point. It leaves open the possibility that its words could find new relevance in any age, in any struggle. The final warning of Enoch. From here, the story of the Book of Enoch moves beyond the text itself into the long centuries when it was copied, preserved, and in most traditions, ultimately set aside. In the centuries following its composition, the Book of Enoch had a surprisingly uneven reception, celebrated in some corners of the ancient world, ignored or actively rejected in others. Among certain Jewish groups during the Second Temple period, it clearly held high status. The Dead Sea Scrolls found at Qumran contain multiple copies of Enochic texts, suggesting that the Essenes, or at least the community that lived there, regarded it as authoritative. Its apocalyptic visions, its concern with purity, and its vivid portrayal of angelic rebellion fit neatly alongside other sectarian writings from the same period. Yet outside of these circles, there's little sign it enjoyed universal acceptance among Jewish authorities. Rabbinic writings from later centuries make almost no mention of it, a silence that speaks volumes. In early Christianity, however, the Book of Enoch found a new audience. One of its most famous appearances is in the New Testament itself. The letter of Jude, verses 14 to 15, directly quotes a passage from Enoch about the Lord coming with 10,000s of his holy ones to execute judgment. This shows that at least some early Christian writers considered it a legitimate source, or at the very least familiar enough to their audience to be cited without explanation. The themes of divine judgment, the fall of the angels, and the vindication of the righteous resonated strongly with Christian apocalyptic preaching, especially in the first few centuries. Church fathers such as Tertullian spoke positively of the text, even defending its use on the grounds that it had been rejected by the Jews because it contained prophecies about Christ. But this acceptance didn't last. By the 4th century, the boundaries of the Christian biblical canon were hardening, and Enoch didn't make the cut in most traditions. Concerns about its origin, questions over its authorship, and its absence from the Hebrew scriptures worked against it. Gradually, it faded from mainstream use, surviving in scattered quotations and references, but no longer widely read in the West. And yet, while it was disappearing in Europe and the Middle East, it was thriving in one unexpected place: Ethiopia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church not only preserved the Book of Enoch in its entirety in the ancient Ge'ez language, but continued to treat it as part of its scriptural canon. This is why when European scholars rediscovered the complete text in the 18th century, it was through Ethiopian manuscripts brought back by travelers. How and why Ethiopia became the last stronghold of the full Book of Enoch remains an intriguing question. Was it the result of early Christian missionaries bringing the text south before it fell out of favor elsewhere? Or did Ethiopian Christianity inherit it through a more direct connection with Jewish communities in antiquity? That's part of the enduring mystery. The same book that was revered enough to be quoted in the New Testament was within a few centuries pushed out of most of the Christian and Jewish world, yet preserved without interruption in a distant highland tradition. It raises the question, was the Ethiopian preservation of Enoch simply an accident of history, or a deliberate choice to hold on to a text others were eager to forget? And if it was deliberate, what did they see in it that others did not? Why Enoch was excluded from the Bible? When you start looking at why the Book of Enoch was left out of most biblical canons, you quickly see there's no single reason. Instead, it's a combination of theological discomfort, practical limitations, and political decisions about which voices would be allowed to shape official scripture. And as with so many cases of exclusion in religious history, the official reasons don't always tell the whole story. One of the biggest theological sticking points is right on the surface. The story of the Watchers, angels who descend to earth, mate with human women, and produce the Nephilim giants. This isn't a casual subplot, it's central to the book's first major section. For mainstream Jewish and later Christian authorities, this narrative raised awkward questions. What did it imply about the nature of angels? Could heavenly beings really be so corruptible? And if they could break such a fundamental boundary, what did that mean for the created order? By the time the biblical canon was being finalized, these ideas clashed with more sanitized doctrines of angelic purity, making Enoch's vivid account a theological liability. Then there's the messianic imagery, especially in the parables of Enoch, which speak of a pre-existent Son of Man figure who will sit in judgment over kings and the unrighteous. In the early centuries CE, this language could be read as aligning uncomfortably closely with Christian claims about Jesus, especially for Jewish authorities working to define their own identity apart from the growing Christian movement. For the emerging Christian canon, the problem was different. The messianic figure is never named as Jesus, and the book's apocalyptic visions could be interpreted in ways that diverged from approved teaching. Calendar disputes also played a role. The astronomical book within Enoch insists on a 364-day solar calendar in contrast to the lunar solar calendar used by the temple in Jerusalem. In the Second Temple period, calendar disagreements were a serious religious fault line, not an academic quibble. Groups like the Qumran sect saw the temple calendar as corrupt and Enoch's calendar as divinely revealed. By canonizing the book, authorities would be legitimizing one side of a live and divisive debate. Practical considerations didn't help Enoch's case either. It's long, much longer than many biblical books, and reads like a compilation of different works written at different times. The change in style and focus between sections made it an awkward fit alongside more unified prophetic or narrative books. And when you're trying to fix a standard set of sacred texts, length and consistency matter. Overlaying all this were political factors. Deciding a canon isn't just about theology, it's about control. The texts you include shape the faith, the authority structures, and the boundaries of orthodoxy. Enoch's detailed angelology, cosmic journeys, and stark warnings about corrupt rulers might have been seen as too open to alternative interpretations or too empowering for groups outside the established hierarchy. A book that gives such prominence to heavenly revelations received apart from the temple or church leadership could easily be used to challenge those institutions' authority. And then there's the lingering suspicion voiced in both ancient and modern times that Enoch was excluded not just for doctrinal neatness, but because it revealed too much. Its stories fill in tantalizing gaps left in Genesis, offering names, motives, and consequences that the canonical text leaves vague. Whatever the exact reasons for its disappearance, theological unease, political convenience, or the simple chaos of history, the Book of Enoch slipped into obscurity for over 1,000 years. But the story doesn't end with its exclusion. Against the odds, this ancient text would re-emerge centuries later, carried back into the world from one of the last places anyone expected it to survive. Modern rediscovery of a lost text. The modern rediscovery of the Book of Enoch reads almost like one of its own stories, a long-lost treasure hidden far from the centers of power, quietly preserved until the right set of circumstances brought it back into the light. For centuries, the book existed in Europe only as rumors, referenced by early church fathers and dismissed by later scholars as a mythical or destroyed text. That changed dramatically in the late 18th century when Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with not just one, but 3 complete manuscripts in the ancient Ge'ez language. Bruce had spent years traveling in the Horn of Africa, a region then largely inaccessible to Europeans. When he presented the manuscripts to European scholars in the 1770s, it was a revelation. Here was the full text of a work that had been quoted in the New Testament, but absent from virtually every Bible for over 1,000 years. 2 of the copies he brought went to the Bodleian Library at Oxford and the Royal Library in Paris, while the 3rd remained with him. For the first time, scholars could read the entire work and begin to compare its contents to the fragments and allusions preserved in other ancient writings. But the real game changer came almost 2 centuries later. Between 1947 and the early 1950s, archaeologists and Bedouin shepherds unearthed the Dead Sea Scrolls in caves near Qumran by the shores of the Dead Sea. Among the thousands of scroll fragments were substantial portions of the Book of Enoch in its original Aramaic. This was the smoking gun that proved beyond doubt the book's deep antiquity and popularity in the centuries before the Common Era. It was no medieval invention or late Christian forgery. It was a genuine product of the Second Temple period, circulating alongside many of the texts that would eventually make it into the Hebrew Bible. The combination of Bruce's 18th century manuscripts and the Qumran discoveries reignited scholarly interest in Enoch on an unprecedented scale. For biblical historians, it offered a window into Jewish thought during a formative era, revealing theological currents about angels, judgment, and cosmic order that influenced both Judaism and early Christianity. For theologians, it raised questions about the fluidity of the canon and how certain books were embraced, then abandoned. And for archaeologists and historians of religion, it connected textual tradition to physical evidence from one of the most significant archaeological finds of the 20th century. Outside academia, the rediscovery had a very different impact. The book's vivid depictions of angelic descent, giant offspring, and cosmic secrets were irresistible to writers on the fringes. From early 20th century theosophists to modern proponents of ancient astronaut theories, for them, the return of Enoch wasn't just a scholarly coup. It was a potential key to unlocking hidden histories about humanity's origins and forgotten cataclysms. While these interpretations often stray far from the text's historical and literary context, they've helped cement the book's place in the popular imagination. From its long exile to its unexpected return, the Book of Enoch had already traveled an extraordinary path. But the rediscovery was only the beginning. Once scholars had the text in hand, they began poring over its pages, tracing its influence, and asking new questions. And as its words were studied in the modern era, one of the most surprising revelations wasn't just what it said, but how far back its story could be traced, something the next chapter in its journey would make even clearer. When archaeologists began sifting through the Qumran caves in the mid-20th century, they didn't just find confirmation that the Book of Enoch existed in antiquity, they uncovered hard physical evidence that deepened the puzzle. Dozens of fragments in Aramaic scattered across multiple caves revealed that Enoch was being copied, studied, and adapted over a span of years, if not centuries. These were not pristine, uniform scrolls. They bore the marks of scribes working at different times with slight variations in spelling, phrasing, and even content. That diversity suggests Enoch wasn't a fixed single-volume text in the ancient world, but a living document, one that could be expanded, shortened, or reshaped to suit its community. The Aramaic itself offers clues. By comparing the vocabulary and grammar of these fragments to other Second Temple writings, scholars can estimate when each copy was made and sometimes where. Certain turns of phrase match known linguistic habits from Judea, while others resemble styles found further afield, hinting at a text that traveled widely. These subtle markers become like archaeological fingerprints, letting researchers trace the movement of ideas as much as the movement of people. But the most tantalizing archaeological insight is the gap. Entire sections of the Ethiopic JS version have no surviving Aramaic counterpart in Qumran. Some scholars take this as evidence those sections were composed later, while others argue the original material simply hasn't been found yet. The possibility that missing caves, yet undiscovered sites, or even private collections might hold those pieces keeps the hunt alive. From a material culture perspective, the scroll fragments also tell us about the communities that valued Enoch. The quality of parchment, the careful ruling of writing lines, and the skill of the scribes indicate a high investment of resources. This wasn't a casual story passed around by word of mouth. It was a work worthy of the same painstaking effort as biblical books like Isaiah or Genesis. All of this is layered over the linguistic challenge. We're reading Enoch primarily through JS, a language that preserves the broad strokes of the original, but inevitably reshapes certain meanings. Astronomical terms, angelic titles, and even numbers can shift subtly in translation. Without the complete Aramaic originals, every modern interpretation rests on the best educated guesses of scholars who must triangulate between fragmentary evidence and centuries-old translations. And that raises the question every archaeologist and linguist working on Enoch quietly carries. If a fully intact early Aramaic copy were to be found tomorrow, buried in an unexcavated cave or sealed in a forgotten archive, would it confirm the Enoch we know today, or reveal that we've been reading a text that is only a partial reflection of its true form? The Book of Enoch's story is as strange as the visions it contains. Once valued and widely read, it slipped into obscurity, surviving only in fragments and a few guarded manuscripts before resurfacing centuries later to spark new fascination. In it, angels walk among humans, secrets of heaven are revealed, and the boundaries between history, myth, and prophecy blur. We've traced its path from a brief cryptic mention in Genesis to an epic account of cosmic rebellion, giants roaming the earth, and visions of final judgment. We've seen how it influenced traditions that never officially recognized it, and how its themes still echo through art, literature, and popular culture today. Perhaps its lasting grip comes from the unanswered questions it leaves behind. Was it history, allegory, or something else entirely? Why did it vanish from so many religious canons? And what truths, if any, still lie hidden in its missing pieces? Whatever the answer, the Book of Enoch remains one of the most tantalizing windows into the ancient imagination, an open invitation to keep asking, searching, and wondering. And as with all great mysteries, maybe that's the point. It was never meant to give us every answer, only to make us look closer. Conclusion: the unfinished tapestry, Enoch's enduring whisper. The journey through the Book of Enoch is a descent into a world that is at once profoundly alien and hauntingly familiar. It begins with a single, enigmatic line in Genesis: Enoch walked with God, then he was no more, because God took him, and expands into a universe of staggering complexity, of angels who break the cosmic order, of giants that shake the earth, of calendars that map divine time, and of a final judgment that resets all of creation. This is not a tidy narrative. It is a tapestry woven over centuries by different hands, a composite vision of rebellion, knowledge, justice, and hope. To conclude is not to arrive at a definitive answer about its truth, but to stand at the edge of the chasm it opens, a chasm between canon and apocrypha, history and myth, earthly struggle and cosmic drama, the bridge between worlds. At its core, the Book of Enoch is an attempt to answer the most fundamental and agonizing questions. Where does evil come from? Why does suffering seem to reign? And where is the justice of God? The Hebrew Bible offered profound but often elliptical answers. Enoch's authors sought something more explicit. They traced the origin of corruption not merely to human failing, but to a primordial rupture in the heavenly realm itself. The Watchers are not just fallen angels. They are the personification of transgressive knowledge, of beauty and power untethered from divine order. Their sin is twofold. They violate the boundary between spirit and flesh, and they gift humanity with arts and sciences, metallurgy, cosmetics, astrology, meant to remain hidden. This is a revolutionary theodicy. Evil enters the world not through a human couple in a garden, but through a celestial rebellion that catastrophically accelerates human history. The flood, then, is not a punishment for general wickedness, but a necessary surgical removal of a cosmic infection. Enoch himself becomes the pivotal figure in this drama. He is the archetypal intermediary, the righteous mortal who navigates both heaven and earth. Unlike Moses, who receives the law, Enoch receives the blueprints of the cosmos, its astronomical rhythms, its angelic hierarchies, its eschatological destiny. He is the scribe, the witness, and the herald. In a world where access to the divine was mediated by temple and priesthood, Enoch represents a more direct, mystical line of communication. This likely explains both its popularity among sectarian groups like the Essenes and its ultimate rejection by emerging orthodoxies. It was a text that empowered the visionary individual and the marginalized community, offering a revelation outside established channels. A mirror to Second Temple Judaism, the Book of Enoch cannot be understood apart from its historical womb, the tumultuous, creative, and often traumatic era of Second Temple Judaism. This was a period of foreign domination, from Greeks to Romans, of intense internal sectarian strife, and of fervent apocalyptic expectation. Enoch's vivid imagery provided a language for this experience. The animal allegories of the dream visions offered a coded, subversive commentary on imperial powers and corrupt Jewish leaders. The detailed 364-day solar calendar of the astronomical book was a radical statement against the Jerusalem Temple's lunar solar calendar, a claim to possess the true, divinely ordained measure of sacred time. The exalted Son of Man in the parables gave hope to the oppressed, a heavenly champion who would shatter earthly kingdoms and establish a reign of justice. In this light, Enoch is less a book of bizarre curiosities and more a theological and political manifesto. It is the cry of communities who felt the world was profoundly out of joint, who saw the structures of power as inherently corrupt, and who believed that the solution must come from a direct, apocalyptic intervention from God, guided by revealed wisdom from the past. It is the literature of a people on the edge, making sense of their plight through cosmic story. The canon that wasn't, and the canon that endured. The subsequent marginalization of Enoch from the Hebrew and most Christian canons is a story as instructive as its content. The reasons are a complex knot of theology, politics, and historical accident. Theological discomfort. The vivid, almost grotesque mythology of the Watchers and their carnal sins clashed with later, more abstract and philosophical Jewish and Christian angelology. Its detailed, mechanistic heaven felt at odds with developing notions of divine transcendence. Authorial uncertainty, its composite nature and pseudepigraphal attribution, claiming the authority of an ancient patriarch, made it suspect in an age increasingly concerned with apostolic or prophetic authorship. Political prudence, its strident criticism of the kings and the mighty, and its endorsement of a rival calendar were potentially subversive. Canonization is, in part, an act of institutional consolidation. Enoch's radical sectarian voice was a risk. Linguistic loss. As Aramaic faded in the West and Greek and Latin dominated, Enoch simply slipped out of reach, surviving only in the linguistic island of Ge'ez. Yet, its exclusion from the canon did not mean eradication. Its ghost lingered powerfully. The New Testament book of Jude directly quotes it, embedding its prophecy into the Christian bloodstream. Early church fathers like Tertullian and Irenaeus debated its merit. Its themes, fallen angels, a final judgment presided over by a glorious Son of Man, resurrection of the righteous, flowed deeply into Christian doctrine and apocalyptic imagination. In its complete, living form, it found a permanent home in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a testament to the diverse paths of early Christian tradition. This alone refutes any notion of a single, monolithic, early Christianity, and reminds us that the biblical canon is a contingent human construct, not a foreordained list. The modern reckoning, archaeology, and imagination. The modern rediscovery of Enoch, first through Ethiopian manuscripts and conclusively through the Dead Sea Scrolls, forced a reckoning. Scholars could no longer dismiss it as a late medieval oddity. Here was a text, written in the centuries before Christ, that demonstrably shaped the intellectual world of Jesus and the early church. It became an essential key for unlocking the mindset of Second Temple Judaism, revealing a Judaism far more theologically diverse and imaginatively rich than the rabbinic sources alone suggested. This scholarly rehabilitation ran parallel to a popular reenchantment. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Enoch's narrative of angelic interbreeding and pre-Diluvian knowledge became a cornerstone for alternative histories, from theosophy to the ancient astronaut hypothesis. While such interpretations often wrench the text from its historical and literary context, they speak to its enduring power. Enoch taps into a deep modern anxiety and curiosity. Are we alone? Were we helped in our ascent? Is our history not what we think? The book provides a mythological language for these profound questions. The unfinished tapestry. So, what are we left with after walking with Enoch through his visions? We are left not with a solved puzzle, but with a richer, more complicated picture of our spiritual ancestry. The Book of Enoch is a testament to the human need for narrative coherence. Faced with the chaos of history and the mystery of evil, its authors spun a story of cosmic scope, connecting the dots between heaven and earth, past and future, sin and judgment. It is also a monument to the courage of the imagination, daring to picture the machinery of the cosmos, the conversations of angels, and the very throne room of God. It challenges us to reconsider the boundaries of Scripture, a text that was authoritative enough to be preserved in the same caves as Isaiah, quoted as prophecy in the New Testament, and cherished as canonical by one of the world's oldest Christian communions, demands our serious engagement, regardless of its canonical status elsewhere. Ultimately, the Book of Enoch endures because it speaks to the perpetual human condition. It speaks to our experience of a world marred by injustice and violence, and our hope for a divine rectification. It speaks to our awe before the stars and our desire to understand their laws. It speaks to our fascination with the boundary between the human and the divine, and the perils and promises of knowledge itself. The clay tablets of Sumer may hold the whispers of forgotten teachers. The steady light of Arcturus may watch with silent patience, but the Book of Enoch offers a different kind of guide, a roadmap of a universe in moral crisis, charted by a man who walked with God and returned, not with simple laws, but with visions. It reminds us that before there were firm creeds and closed canons, there was a wilderness of wonder, terror, and revelation. And in that wilderness, the figure of Enoch still walks, a messenger between realms, urging us to look up at the heavens and deep into our own hearts, and to remember that the story of our struggle and our hope for justice is written into the very fabric of the cosmos. The final word on Enoch is not a period, but an ellipsis, an invitation to keep searching, questioning, and listening for the whispers from beyond the veil.